Before we actually get into Osaka, I did want to bring up, like I did mention that there was a couple clips that I watched over the weekend on my stream where players were caught cheating on camera. That happened over the last couple of weeks. Like one thing I mentioned earlier in the podcast was like, I mean, there's not that many games that are being streamed. So there has to be like the percentage of players that are doing this is probably it's like I had that realization over the weekend. It's like if these two incidences happened over the last 2 weeks or whatever, um, there's not that many games that are being streamed. Like, the percentage of players that are actually cheating at these tournaments has to be a lot higher than I've ever thought it was, for sure, I feel like, right? But I think the biggest thing I think there's a lot more there's 2 things that I think need to happen. There needs to be people just need to or the judge there needs to be no tolerance, right? It has to be if someone cheats, it's gotta be a DQ, it's gotta be a ban, right? This is the first time you've seen this one?
Yes.
Yeah, so the first one that I mentioned was the Lugia player. They drop a Marnie from their deck into their hand. The second one is, yeah, the first one is the Lugia player distracts their opponent by asking something about their discard pile, and then they drop a Marnie from their deck into their hand,
Yep. Pretty
while they're
clearly.
using while they're using Archeops. And the second one is at a cup, I believe it was in Peru. I think is where it was. There was what the original tweet said. The player set up to play the game. They and you can actually kind of see the player on the left's deck is look. It looks a little
It
short.
does it does look small,
It
yeah.
looks a little small. So they're setting up for the game. They flip the coin, and then the player on the left takes a stack of cards out of their pocket and puts it on top of their deck. So they get the perfect starting hand plus maybe some bad prize cards, like good
Yeah.
prize cards to have prize. So I don't know how many cards it was. It was probably just a good 7. Probably they probably just put a good starting hand on top of the deck, but the deck does look a little small before they put their hand on top of the deck.
I feel
Um,
like I would have been sitting across from them and seen this and counted their deck. Like, I feel like I would have been able to recognize that does not look like 60 cards.
I definitely had some moments like that before where then I've counted my opponent's deck sometimes. That is the first time I've ever seen someone cheat in that way, where they take 7 cards out of their pocket, I assume 7 cards, and put it on top of their deck after they've decided who goes first and players have cut the decks and everything. So, but yeah, I think there's 2 things with this. Like, I've never thought cheating wasn't a problem, which is an opinion people like to assign to me. I think cheating is a problem. I think people do cheat. I don't think you should go into a match assuming your opponent's a cheater, and I don't think it's as prevalent as a lot of people think it is. But it's probably more prevalent than I have given it credit in the past. The 2 things that have to come with this, there needs to be no tolerance on the organizer side, and I think there's been like a bad reputation or like a bad perception built up between us and Pokemon, namely due to one incident that happened the season before last, with a player not getting any kind of punishment. Um, After that happened, I think it definitely built up a little bit of I don't know, like I don't know, a distrust between us and TPCI, the community and TPCI, right? TPCI or tournament organizer in general, it needs to be DQ banned instantly if when it depending on when it's caught, right? But on the player side of things, you guys need I dude, some of the stories I hear that happen and then players don't call over a judges is like mind blowing. I'm like, how do you not call over a judge in this situation? Like, and the thing is, and because I stream and stuff, people come in my chat and be like, "Hey, Azul, this thing happened. Should I have called over a judge?" And I'm like, "Yes." And they were like, "Oh, I didn't because I was kind of tired." It's like, I don't know what you guys expect. Like, if you guys want people to be able to cheat and get away with it, I guess don't call over judges. But like, it's definitely some of it comes on the tournament organizer side of things. The DQs and bans need to be more aggressive, more harsh, more immediate. It just needs to be no tolerance for it, and like that needs to be the expectation. If you ever get caught doing anything like that, instant DQ, instant ban. Maybe it doesn't have to be a perma ban. That's like up for discussion. That's the only thing that should be up for discussion. I guess it maybe doesn't have to be a perma ban. But on the other side of the things, the player base, the community, you who are listening to this, you got to call over a judge. If anything happens where it's like, yeah, this is a little weird. This is a little sus. This could be happening. Call over a judge, get it resolved, make sure everyone's on the same page. Hopefully, it's nothing drastic and you just kind of progress with your game from there. But you guys got to start calling over judges more often because
Yeah.
it's crazy some of the stories I hear.
Yeah, gotta call over the judge. Even if it seems like a minor thing that's solvable in the moment, like you stop them from doing whatever the thing is, they at least will be able to like if it's a local tournament, they're aware of that player. And if it's at a regional championships, it gets made note of. A warning is issued, it's get made note of, and then if in the future in that tournament something else happens, the judges will know, hey, this person had an issue in an earlier round. Actually, I think I've told this story before, but one of the tournaments I played in last year, one of the regionals, round one. My opponent and I were sitting there waiting. We had set up. We had our opening hands. Um, we were listening to the announcements for round one of the tournament, waiting to start. I was kind of like looking around, listening, looking who was like, down my table, down the row, seeing whatever, looking side to side. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, during the earlier part of the uh, while we were waiting, my opponent had been sitting there running his thumb along the side of his deck. I thought it was just kind of like a, nervous tick, whatever. He's just kind of sitting there going like this, shuffling his deck like this. And then as I'm looking to the side, he all of a sudden goes to cut his own deck and like move the top stack and put like change the cards that are on top of his deck effectively.
After you guys had set up?
Yes, we had set up. We had our opening hands. He goes, I think I'm sure I told the story on the
You
podcast at
maybe
some point.
have.
And so I was like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I was just cutting my deck." So I raise my hand and call over a judge, and the judge comes over. They talk about it. I tell them exactly what happened. My opponent disputed nothing, by the way, just sat there and kind of listened to what was happening. The people beside me are also like kind of knew what was happening as well. Maybe I didn't tell the story on the podcast because it was like
You maybe
recent to
haven't.
the tournament, and I didn't want to like put I don't know put the guy on blast or whatever. But I don't know. It was very a suspect situation. And then so they give him a warning. They, just give him a warning. We go on. We get a little extension because the tournament had started, and then we go in. We start our game, whatever. My opponent was playing Lugia. He was going first. He goes turn one, started like Cobalion or something like that. Draw, pass. I
The
was like,
mini top deck would have been pretty good there.
interesting, interesting.
Yeah, but those
But
write-ups are
simple
important
it's like something
because
simple where it's like, I caught my opponent, I said, "Stop, what are you doing?" It could have just been written off as, "Oh, he, like, just thought it was something he could randomly do for some reason." But I called over the judges make note of it, they get a warning, we move on, and now you just I don't know, who knows what was happening over there on that side of the table.
yeah, and honestly, that seems like I could see that being that maybe should have been harsher, but let's just say a warning is like, a warning for the first time for that maybe is fine, but for the 4th time or 5th time, it's like, "Okay, what is going on here?" Like, there needs to be something harsher happening. We keep getting called over to this one guy's table, and he keeps trying to cut his deck after in a situation where you should not be cutting your deck. Like,
Yeah.
at that point, it is match loss, game loss, DQ, something like that, right?
Or, for
So,
example, if a player keeps, I don't know, accidentally mulliganing when they had a basic Pokemon in their hand, it gets caught a few times into the tournament, and then something finally happens, right?
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, y'all gotta, like, step up the judge calling. When I say y'all, I mean, obviously, some people out there do it, and some people are in situations where they don't have to. You guys know you should know what I mean when I say talking to the community at large, because I hear way too many stories at tournaments, people asking me questions in my chat, like, just it's too much. It's too much, and it's ridiculous. I was like and every time I'm always like, "Yeah, you always call over a judge." I would call over a judge if I was in that scenario. Just gotta do it, not feel bad about it. Get the judge involved, it's fine. If your opponent's, like, a reasonable person who's also, like, fairly competitive, they'll have, like, an understanding for it as well.